Welcome to TaNaCh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingston, Texas, USA, with another episode of Sanders on Psalms, Part 2, Psalms 1, verses 1 through 6, with Gabriel, the man REA Sanders. Welcome back. And would you share your full screen? I forgot to tell you, please share your full screen with me real fast. That'd be great.
My full screen.
Or stop sharing your main screen. There you go. Yeah. There we go. Ah, there he is. There's a handsome fella. All right. Now I can fade out the music now that I've got your presence here. Very good. Awesome. So here we are back again. I guess you could say partners in crime, doing our thing here with my dear friend, awesome Hebrew scholar and teacher and tzaddik, Gabriel. Welcome back, brother.
You really need to get out more often, and we need to get you a new dictionary on some definitions of key terms about certain persons you know. So, but that's okay.
Okay.
Let's just go with friend. And
okay, we'll start with that
because there's a great scholar lives right across the street from me, Dr. Berger, and I've just been working on Hebrew for many years, several decades actually.
Nice.
And what I know. But one of the funny things about second language acquisition, especially since I was 24 when I started learning Hebrew, there's always this sense of, no matter how proficient I think I am, I know that there are these like Swiss cheese whole areas in my knowledge. So
I see.
Israelis tell me my Hebrew is really good, but I always feel this certain sense of, but I can't talk about legal issues or microbiology or astrophysics. So if I could get to that.
Well, to be fair, my English is excellent, and I can't talk about any of those things either.
Okay, that's fair enough. So, well, shall we get to it?
Let's do it.
So let me just quick recap. If you are joining us on this edition of Sanders on Psalms, and you haven't looked at the first one that we did, it's about roughly around 40 minutes or so. So it might be worth just pausing this, going over, watching that. Secondly, if you didn't get the notes from the last time and you'd like to have them, then you can see my email address right here on the screen, down by to me, I'm looking at the lower left, might be your lower right, not sure. But you're certainly welcome to just shoot me an email. And all you have to do is say in the subject line notes, and I'll be happy to send those to you. So we talked a lot about some 30 different benefits for being closely linked to, cleaving to the Psalms. There's more than that. There's close to 70 in the book that I'm using as a basis for our study. But put about 30 of them in there that might be meaningful to you. So it's worth having.
Awesome.
All right. So today we're actually diving into the text itself. And I wanted to give you just a little bit of a,
pretext,
pre-ramble, I guess I should say.
There you
go. So let me bring this up so you can see this. It's slides on the screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So what's our order of approach today? Well, we're going to hear and see. We see and hear the text chanted. We're going to see and hear the text read and explained. So there's it's a place called archive.net, which has a vast amount of information on it. Quite a bit of it sort of useless. But I did find some very good recordings of most of TaNaCh. Some of them are just straight read, and some of them are cantillated. There's a cantillation, which we're going to hear today, because especially in the Sephardi community, which is more my orientation as far as pronunciation, there are Ashkenazi pronunciations where the tuf is pronounced as a suf, and they put the emphasis on the first syllable or the next to last, as opposed to the way that Hebrew usually is pronounced, with the emphasis on the last syllable, unless it's otherwise indicated. So I'll play that for you. You can hear how it's done. I was just at the minyan I went to yesterday. Minyan means the prayer group, or the quorum, the gathering I was with yesterday. It's very interesting because different ones will, as we're going through the order of service, different ones will read different sections, just kind of going right through. You hear it pop over here, pop over there, and it's a very nice sing-song way to do it. We're not going to do that today, but you will hear how it's done in the first rendition of the first pass through the text, which is only about 1 minute and 20 seconds. We're going to review the verbs that are in this psalm, take a look at those. We're going to do a quick overview of what's called the binyanim, the Hebrew verb system. We're going to look at some little letters that have big meanings. There's vital prefixes that people need to be aware of if you're not. And I have a very simple way for you to remember what they are. Doesn't take any effort. We're going to talk about something called smichut, which is Hebrew compound nouns. How does Hebrew put things together, like schoolhouse, or there's something called Beit Cholim, which is house of the sick, which means hospital. There's a certain system for that, which a lot of people don't know, but it shows up in this particular psalm. So everything that I'm putting here on the screen are things that are extracted. What's the word that we used to use? That we're drawing right out of the text. And then finally, as a kind of an application, I want to take a look at a truth that's sort of hiding in plain sight here. So let's take a listen to the text itself as it's chanted with Rabbi Dan Be'eri, starting with the first verse here. And I'm just going to, I'm going to put the whole text up here. There we go. And excuse me while I put on my big headphones so I can hear it. There we go, along with you. And here we go.
אשרי האיש אשר לא הלך בעצת רשעים ובדרך חטאים לא עמד ובמושב לצים לא ישב כי אם בתורת אדוני חפצו ובתורתו יהגה יומם ולילה והיה כעץ שתול על פלגי מים אשר פריו ייתן בעיתו ועליהו לא ייבול וכל אשר יעשה יצליח לא כן הרשעים כי אם כמוץ אשר תדפנו רוח על כן לא יקומו רשעים במשפט וחטאים בעדת צדיקים כי יודע אדוני דרך צדיקים ודרך רשעים תאבד.
Okay, so this is Psalm 1. We call this from Sefer Tehillim, which means the book of praises. We talked about that last week. And as we walk through the text, we're just going to do basically what I used to do with old Dr. Paul Gabeline years ago when I was on the other side of the spiritual universe as a young Christian minister. And I took some classes at Fuller Seminary. I was not a full-time student at Fuller, and I don't want anybody to think that I didn't. I took some ad hoc classes, adjunct classes there with Dr. Gabeline in Hebrew readings. So, Ashrei Ha'ish. So this word Ashrei appears a number of times in the text, several times in Psalms. I think 8 or 9, if I did count them at one point, and has to do with the expression of happiness or fortunate. So fortunate is the person, Ha'ish, the man, the person. Asher. Now you see, this looks a little confusing, doesn't it? You see Asher right here, and you see it right here, but they're not related. This Asher means which. So happy is the person who or which lo halach, has not walked, didn't walk, ba'atzat reshaim. So this comes with the word eitzah. Eitzah is counsel, wisdom, advice. So atzat reshaim is the counsel of the wicked, if you will, the ungodly. Now, if the word is eitzah for counsel, why is it atzat? We'll come back to that a little later. Atzat Hashem. Uvaderech hataim lo amad. So in the way of the sinners, lo amad. So we have here the idea of walking. We have here the idea of standing. Halach, amad. Halach, walked. Amad, stood. Uvmoshav leitzim lo yashav. And in this word has a number of different possible renderings. I think it's rendered in a number of English translations as seat. In modern Hebrew, a moshav is actually a mix of private and communal property. So there's kibbutz, some people know that, and there's moshav. Moshav can also mean a settlement. There are a number of different small communities in Israel called moshav this, moshav that. But in this context, it's meaning a place where people are seated. Uv moshav leitzim. Now, who are the leitzim? A leitz is someone who's a scoffer, a mocker, kind of a clown, you could say. Someone who has an attitude that's not sincere and who is just kind of deliberately mocking that which knows to be the best. Any of you that watched, and it says that that in the Moshav Leitzim, this happy person here hasn't walked in this way, stood in this place, or sat amongst these people, the Leitzim. He hasn't done that. And if you watch the video that I recommended to you with Rabbi Zamir Cohen, then you saw that he talked about the fact that one of the ways that people scorn is they don't give priority to the things that are most important. So if someone is wasting time, for example, our Creator gave us 1,440 minutes a day to invest in our service to Him. And if we're using them for something else, then that's a kind of scorning of the purpose for which we're here. That's just, and if you haven't watched that, go back to the first one and take a look. It's about 24 minutes. Very well worth watching. So we also notice here that we have sort of some slowing motion, some descent going on here. We have someone who's walking, then he's standing, then he's sitting. So this is someone who gets sunk down in something. Second thing is, what's the difference between, we mentioned what a leitz was, but what's the difference between rashaim and chataim? Rashaim are people who deliberately do the wrong thing. They know it's wrong. They don't care. They do it. It's called a willful sin. In Hebrew, and certainly when we talk about these things in rabbinic studies, we just discuss something that's done b'mezid. Mezid is like I know it's wrong, I'm doing it. And then there's something called where somebody does something that's called b'shogeg or b'shkia, in error. So chataim are people who do something that they didn't know was wrong, but they made an error. If any of you are, I studied Greek for at least 3 years when I was in the Bible college. Some people call it the theological seminary, really. But we learned that the word chet, or the equivalent of it in Greek, is hamartia. And the idea of hamartia, sin, the Greek word for sin, is to miss the mark. This is pretty much the same thing, missing the mark. You know, you were trying to do something and it didn't work out, or you did it wrong. So the happy person avoids those who are deliberately committed to a sinful path, and avoids those who are who are standing around in error, and certainly doesn't sit amongst those who are just wasting their time scoffing. Next verse, Ki'im, b'torat Hashem hefzo, u'v'torato yechke yomam v'layla. I love this passage. It's interesting. Some of you know these two little words here, ki, which can be translated that or because, and the word im,
If.
which can be if. But when we put the two of them together, ki-im,
when?
it means rather.
Rather. Oh.
So it's a contrastive term. And you'll see this in a number of different places. You'll see this, it's kind of the equivalent. There's a word ach, but I don't mean ach, the one that means brother. That's aleph and a het. This, the one I'm talking about, ach, is aleph and a chaf sofit, a final chaf. And that means like however, or but. So here we have a contrast. So this person is happy when he's avoiding these things, but what's the positive side of what he's doing? This is ki im b'torat Hashem hefzo. So hefzo is an interesting word because it means, it's translated his desire in most translations that I've seen. The word chefetz can actually mean like stuff, material things, or something that just stuff is a good translation, I guess, to be colloquial about it. So ki im b'torat Hashem chefzo. So in other words, rather in Hashem's Torah. And by the way, the reason I didn't spell out the divine name here is because if I send notes to people and they print it off and I don't want it to be thrown away. So that's just to explain. If I don't want to get any emails about like, you didn't put the name properly. I did this deliberately. So just keep that in mind, because there are all kinds of opinions out there. So in Hashem's Torah is his delight or his desire or his priority. And in his Torah, yechge, interesting word. We talked about it a little bit last week. Yechge is related to a word for, like, on a boat, you've got a rudder, or in a car, you have a steering wheel. So in modern Hebrew, we call a hege a steering wheel. So, but the actual word here, as we'll see when we look at the verbs shortly, is yechge from the lehagot, has to do with meditation, but it's a meditation that's tied to like muttering or sort of reciting over. So there's a verbal component to this kind of expression that in Hashem's Torah, this person, it's always on this person's lips, yomam valayla, day and night. You say, well, Gabriel, why doesn't it say yom valayla? Why does it say yomam valayla? So according to one commentator, and that's all I have to go by here, is the one commentator, he said that it's not just day and then night, it's even the time between, and that this mem covers a time period that we would call it twilight. So it's all encompassing for this individual's focus, that this person's constantly delighting in and thinking about and expressing on his or her lips this positive obsession or connectedness to Hashem's Torah.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
So on that word, could you pronounce it again? The Yud Hey Gimel Hey.
Yechge.
Okay, it almost sounded like you were using the hey as a chet in a frenetic. Was that intentional, or is that just kind of the way it comes out?
No. It's just I need some more. I need some more coffee. That's all.
I was gonna say coffee or water. so for me, and like I said, I know my pronunciations of things are nowhere near accurate like they should be. But when I read that, it was like yege.
Okay. Well, I'm pronouncing the H so you can hear it.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise it just kind of goes away. So I could say yechge, and if you weren't reading it, could be an olive, yechge, or yeah. Okay. There's three shades here. There's and there's
Gotcha.
So it's a little difficult for people to do the middle one, but that's okay. Also,
good.
Since you brought up a very good point, and I think I want to just hitchhike on your thought for a moment.
Okay, sure.
What is the proper or received, if you will, pronunciation for Hebrew? In other words, where do you put the emphasis? And I'll tell you that the emphasis is on the last syllable of each word, unless indicated otherwise. So I'll say it again. In Hebrew, when you're reading Hebrew, the emphasis is on the last syllable, unless indicated otherwise. Now, unfortunately, this I can see some things didn't come through when I pasted this over, but let's just listen to how I do it. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzat reshaim.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you see, it was all on the last.
So on that one word, yege, it would be the ge would be the more.
That would be the emphasized syllable.
Yege.
Now, when we see words that have either two dots right here, I'll cover that up so you see two, what's called a tzere,
right,
or the three dots, which is called a segol, pronounced E, like in the word get. Uvederech. Now listen, you see it? Uvederech. I emphasize this syllable, the next to the last one. So this is known as a segolet noun, and segolet nouns, which have their nouns that have segols, those are pronounced with the emphasis on the syllable prior to the last one. Okay. Again, don't try to remember all of this, because we're going to bump into this again and again. But I'm just, for those who need this or never heard this, it's important to know. So otherwise people tackle the text and they're not really sure where to get it. And you could actually change the meaning of what you're saying by putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Okay.
Nice.
So let me finish this out. Uvederech chataim lo amad, uvmoshav leitzim lo yashav. So there was only one place in this whole line that we didn't put the emphasis on the final syllable, and that was on this word here, derech. Okay. So the word for book, for example, in Hebrew, sefer, the emphasis is on the first syllable, not the second. Why? Because it's a segolet noun. The word for child, boy, yeled. It's not yeled, it's yeled. So why? Because it's a segolet noun, right? And oftentimes in the biblical text and in, let's say, the Siddur, in the Hebrew text, you'll see like a little straight line. Usually there's a little straight line right about here. And that's called a meteg or meseg is an Ashkenazi pronunciation. And that little straight line tells you that that's where to put the emphasis. Okay. All right. So we've discovered that there's a happy to avoid certain things. And on the flip side, has this deep connectedness to Hashem's Torah to the point where it's on the person's lips day and night through a process known as yekeh, meditation, which involves, according to the etymology of the word, a kind of muttering. So, by the way, that's why when I walk into like any yeshiva, it's not silent like a library. It's a noisy place as people are sitting even alone and they're going through. It's like they're chanting whatever they're studying. It's to put it out there. It's adding multiple dimensions to one's learning. You're seeing it, you're saying it, you're hearing it, you're putting it out there. That's a very standard way of Jewish study, by the way. All right, v'hayat. So now this is an interesting one. If you know the tenses on the to be verbs in Hebrew, you'll know that this one's standing by itself. It means it was or he was. There's no it in Hebrew, by the way. It's either masculine or feminine. So, but this vav here can be a real pesky fellow. Why? Because there's two types of vavs. There's a vav that connects things together, like the word and. We all know that. But then there's another function of it where, while it means and, it also flips the time around. So if the time of this verb is past, it flips the meaning into the future. And if the time of this verb is future, it flips the meaning back into the past. That can be very challenging for people who are keen to learn Hebrew, because it's one thing to learn the past and the present and the future forms. And I have a wonderful, easy place for you to go called pe'alim.com that I send all my students to there to be able to parse out these verbs. But getting it down in your head so that you can remember that, oh, is this a conversive verb that converts the time, or is this a one that is connecting, conjunctive kind of. So this is, and he will be. So it looks past, but it's really future. He will be. Who's he? We're talking about the person who doesn't do these things but does do these things. Now we're going to use a metaphor. He's going to be ke'etz shatul al palgi mayim. He's going to be like a tree, shatul, planted, upon, palge mayim. So these are, palge mayim, this is from the word peleg. Peleg was also a name in the book of Genesis. You might recognize it. Palge mayim from plagim are divisions of water. Asher, here's the word again, the word which, basically, which Pirio yiten beito. His fruit, if you know the word pri, like pri Gan Eden, the fruit of Gan Eden. Pirio, his fruit, yiten, he will give. This is a standard future form of give. Beito, in his season, in its time. Ve'alehu, and his leaf, lo yibol, will not wither. V'chol asher ya'aseh yatzliach. So everything that he does, v'chol asher ya'aseh yatzliach. So here we see asher is here, asher is here, asher is here. This is a very common word, which. And ya'aseh yatzliach, these are two very straightforward future verbs. There are different categories as far as the 7 different major types of action in Hebrew, but these are very straightforward ones that mean future. All right, so far we found a person who's content by avoiding certain things, content by being committed to certain things, and we have a metaphor that describes the fruitfulness of this person's life. Now we're going to do another contrast. So up here we did a contrast with ki'im, rather. Now, lo chen. Most people at basic Hebrew level know that the word lo means no,
Right.
and ken, or in this case chen, there's a reason why it's without the dot. We'll get into that, but I don't want to overwhelm right now. Lo chen harshaim. Not so is basically what this means. Not so the wicked. So here's the word up here. We saw the rashaim. Here the rashaim are back again. Harshaim. Ki'im. Look, there it is again. Rather.
Right.
Here it is again. Rather. And now we're going to use another kind of analogy, just like we said here. Ke'etz shatul al pal gemaim. Like a tree. Here it's going to be like chaff. Motz. The word motz means chaff. Asher tidfeinu ruach. In other words, which chaff that the wind blows. This particular verb is feminine in its structure because the word ruach is a feminine noun. It's ruach, ruchot for the plural in this case. By the way, there are a number of Hebrew verbs that they may be masculine in the singular and have a feminine ending in the plural, or vice versa. It's why, not sure, just a fact of life, and one has to learn them case by case. So we've said that this is not the case with the wicked. They don't prosper. They're not planted by streams of water. They're not fruit bearing. Their leaves are not withering. They're being basically chaff blown around by the wind. Somebody kicked the dandelion flower and the seeds went everywhere. Therefore, alkin. So here we have lokin, not so. Alkin, this means therefore. Lo yakumu, will not arise, from the word lakum, to rise or to arise. Lo yakumu reshaim b'mishpat. So the wicked people will not arise in judgment. In other words, they don't have a leg to stand on, basically. They're not going to go through the time of judgment and pass favorably. V'chataim ba'adat tzadikim. So now we're back to the chataim, the ones who are erring. They won't stand. Look right here. It says, this is ba'atzat reshaim. This is ba'adat tzadikim. Very similar structure, different meaning. This comes from the word edah. This is the word eitzah. This is from council. This is the word edah, has to do with congregation. Adat tzadikim is the congregation of the righteous ones, plural here. And then, as we concluded, ki, because. So here we had a case of ki'im, but that put together was rather. Also, again here, ki'im, that's rather. But here, isolated means either that or because. In this case, it means because. Ki yodea Hashem, Hashem knows, derech tzadikim, v'derech reshaim toved. So the way of the righteous, Hashem knows that way. And the way of the wicked, derech reshaim, toved means will perish, from the word oved. Now, Sibsi, wait a minute, you said oved, does that mean work? Yes, with an ayin, it means work, oved. This is with an aleph, oved. So, with that out of the way, I just want to take a quick look at the verb forms, and these are here in the notes for you to study if you want to go back and do those yourself. I don't want to walk through the meanings of all of them because I put them here in English. But what's interesting is that most of the verbs here in this psalm are what we call number one, and you'll see what that means in a moment. Class one verbs. They're simple verbs like walk and talk and walk and speak. Well, not speak, talk, say, drink, sit, write. Really high frequency, simple type of verbs. That's what they're called. Kal, simple. In verse 2, here's the word yeke. It comes from hoge or lehagot, meditate, mutter. Verse 3, it's really past without the vav. It would be was, but this is a conversive vav, so it's changing it over. Shatul comes from the root shatal. We talk about shtilim in modern Hebrew. These are basically types of plants. Lahashtil, which is a number 5 verb. Don't worry about that. We'll get to all that. Has to do with causing something to be planted. But this is the simple form of it. You notice the vowels here. Ah. Notice here. Ah. Those are indicative of what a number one verb looks like in the past. And by the way, the way we figure out what a number one verb is we ask a very simple question. We say, what did he do yesterday? Because not only is this the root of the verb. We talk about a shorish, a root. Hebrew verbs are, in fact, most Hebrew words are sort of built from a verb, from a three-letter root system, starting with the verb. But then we build nouns from them. We can build adjectives from them. We can build adverbs from them. And if this is causing you grief and post-traumatic stress because you had the kind of English teacher that I had in the 8th grade that made me write 500 times, I am cognizant of my transgressions and regret the necessity for these restitutions because I wasn't paying attention in class. So if you're having a flashback to those kinds of things, don't worry. This is a little bit more advanced level class for people that have some kind of a basis, but you're welcome to hitchhike along with us if this is not your thing yet. And just listen. We'll come back to it. These things come around and around again. We look at a number of different psalms as we go through this. All right. Here's a future verb, ye10, will give. The infinitive form, the to give, is a kind of a weird, was letet. So what happened to it? And also the word in the plural, in the present, excuse me, the word in the present is noten. Where's the nun? Well, we're going to look at some categories where there are letters that are weak and they kind of go out to lunch. They take a break, they vanish, they go away. So we'll see some. This is one of them. Sometimes nun goes away. Yibol is also another one. It's related. Its root is a nun, nabal or naval. Ya'aseh, will do, will make. This is also it's a number one verb. If I just go asa, he did, he made. Yatzliach is a number 5 verb. Matzliach, lehatzliach. Verse 4, we see tidfenu. Tidfenu has to, this is the root of it, nadaf. So right here we have 1, 2, 3. That if you didn't know it, you wouldn't know that the first letter is actually a nun. So what's this phenomenon? Well, we're going to bump into some more of this along the way. So right now, just be aware of the fact that there are verbs that have letters that sort of appear and disappear. I guess sound like quarks, huh? Sound very interesting. In verse 5, yakumu, this is also a number 1 verb, but it is some interesting characteristics because it's a weak verb. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it means will arise, will rise up. And here we have the word yodea. This is a number 1 verb. It's in this is very much in the present form. Yodea. The past is just the yud, the dalet, and the ayin, and it would be yada. Yada means he knew. That's why I said that we asked the question, what did he do yesterday? That's how we figure out what the dictionary form is in Hebrew, because in English, if you want to know the dictionary form of a verb, you have to know present. Drink. Drank is past. Write. Wrote. So in Hebrew, we look it up based on the past. And then here's a future form, toved, which means will perish. And now, just for fun, I've been fooling around with Chat GPT lately for a variety of different things. I find it very, very interesting. And I'm not going to read through all of this, but I asked it, could you explain to me the Hebrew verb system? And this is what it gave me. So it talked to me about something called the binyanim. Binyan means, has nothing to do with Paul Bunyan, right? Binyan has to do with building. So verbs, as I mentioned a moment ago, words are built from a common root, right? So, for example, the word kotev and the word michtav, letter versus writing, or the word shote and shtia, drink, and that's the thing that you drink, a drink, from a common root. And we see that there are 7 categories of these, right? Going all the way down from, I had a professor who, I don't know how much Hebrew he really knew, but he loved to say this. He said, what do you know about Hebrew? I said, I think a fair bit. Well, there's the pal, the nifal, the peel, the pual, the hifil, the hoval, and the hate pile. He liked to say that, every time I saw. I don't think he's in this world any longer, but he used to like to say that. What this indicates to us here, though, is that there are different types of action that in English, I'll give you a good example of what I mean by different types of action. I'll give you 1 verb, 2 sentences. I walk every day. I walk the dog every day. Is there a difference? You betcha. I walk every day is something about I'm doing. In I walk the dog, I'm causing the dog to walk. In Hebrew, there's a different construction of the second verb, so you can differentiate it from the first one. And so it's very easy to see that this one means I'm causing something to take place. Another example. I dressed myself this morning. I'm dressing the baby. Those are two different types of action, and they're constructed differently. Same root, the root is there, but there's a series or a collection or a combination, let's say, of prefixes, suffixes, or even infixes. Those are letters that go inside of a word that Hebrew does. So each binyan has its own set of rules and patterns. Once you learn them, you can create a wide variety of verb forms and convey a range of meanings. So thank you, Chat GPT. How does Sanders do it? Well, I talk about these 7 types of actions, and I say that numbers 1, 3, and 5, in those, a subject is doing an action. Tom is hitting the ball. Or in this case, John broke the glass. That would be number 1 here. I'll come back to 3 and 5 in a minute on another slide. And numbers 2, 4, and 6, something or someone is being acted upon by an action. In other words, the glass was broken by John. Did the glass break itself in this case? No, it was broken. We may know who did it. We may not know who did it. We just know, the only thing we know is the glass was broken. And in the 7th one, the action is performed on itself. Not always, but as far as the basic structure. So in other words, the glass broke itself. I dressed myself, I showered myself, I shaved myself. Any of you that are familiar with Spanish will know that there's a component in Spanish verb system that is reflexive, and there's a structure for that and how you put it together. So besides 7 types of action, there are 2 general types of verbs, strong ones and weak ones. What makes them weak? The presence of certain letters which influence how a verb will be spelled or pronounced. And there are several groupings of strong and weak verbs. You say, Sanders, this is kind of overwhelming to me. Relax, there's some good news for you. When you've mastered one form, you've really mastered all that fall into that category. And after doing this for a few decades, I've been able to crack this code for myself and certainly help some of my students, like the Ulpan that I do at a yeshiva nearby. It's a lot easier to do it. I just picked up a new student last week. We've been going through this system this week, and it's like it's so amazing to watch the eyes light up with, I get it. Because just the appearance of Hebrew can be difficult for someone's eyes. The whole right-left orientation. There are some sounds that aren't necessarily native to our way of speaking. Consonant clusters. When you put certain things, like the word for street. All right, str. That's very easy. But there are other combinations of consonants that don't necessarily roll off the tongue so comfortably, and Hebrew has a number of those. So here we have a binyan. So binyan can mean a verb system, or in this case, a building. And notice that I have here an arrow pointing to each of the 7 floors of this building. So let's take another look. Don't try to master this. Don't try to memorize this. Just observe and go, okay, it's a point of reference, because we're going to, through the course of our study, zero in on each of these as they're appropriate for us, okay? There we go. Starting at the bottom, we have one called kal. Kal basically is the word for simple or easy. And these are, floor number 1 is simple active. I walk, I drink, I talk, I write, I throw, simple verbs like that. This one, which is called nifal, is simple passive. So I said down here, I wrote. Up here, it was written, or it is being written. Here, I ate, it was eaten. That's why these are the same color, because they belong to this simple verb category. Then we come up to the third one, called PL. And again, I'm not going to take time on what these are kind of made up words here. Kal is not, but nifal, PL, to illustrate the music or the pattern of how a verb sounds in the past. And this one has to do with intensive action. So let's go back to, we said right before in the previous slide, 2 slides back, that John broke a glass, right? So let's take this one. John broke the glass. 2, the glass was broken by John. 3, intensive. John shattered the glass. That's a bit more intense, right? And when we come to the one above it, which is passive, the glass was shattered by John. Did the glass shatter itself? No, John did it. In this case, we know who did it, but I could have just said, man, the glass was shattered. The window was shattered. or her hopes were shattered, to use something, the more dramatic. So 3 and 4 are known as intensive action. They're not as all dramatic as what I just said, the difference between breaking and shattering. But that is kind of part of the structure that goes through here. For right now, you can also think that these are just sort of patterns of how verbs sound. Like we have in English, we have regular verbs and irregular verbs. Most people use them without even knowing that they're using them. But in Hebrew, they're pretty obvious and they're easy to learn. Just learn one of each of the categories, and you should, over time, be in pretty good shape. So number 5 and number 6 are related. Hifil and Hofal, sometimes called Hufal, and this is causative. So again, John broke the glass. The glass was broken by John. John shattered the glass. The glass was shattered by John. John caused the glass to break. The glass was caused to be broken by John. You say, man, this is a lot of gobbledygook. No, it's a way of looking at types of action. If I come back down here and I say, I wore a hat, and then up here, the 7th one, which is reflexive, this is something I did to or for myself. I dressed myself, or here, I dressed my dog in a funny costume. So here I'm causing the dog to be dressed. Here I'm wearing something myself. I wore a hat. And here I dressed myself. All those 3, this one, actually, I could use this one also. So 1, 5, 6, and 7 could all come from the same root, lamed, beit, shin, but the application of the action, the expression of the action would be different. And you say, Sanders, this is getting heavy duty. Yes, don't try to master all this right now. Just hear it, because it's going to come back around again. I had to hear it many, many times before this finally really sunk in. I went, oh, I got it. Okay, let's proceed. Now, I want to quickly segue to letters that attach to the front of a word and their meaning, because we had a few of them when we talked about V'haya ke etz shatul al pal gemaim, that this happy person who avoids these not so nice people who could bring him down, that he avoids them, and he's like a tree planted by the water. How does Hebrew express the idea of similarity or comparison? It either uses the word kmo, kaf mem vav, a cholam vav, or it puts a k on the front of the word, ke etz. We compared the wicked people, ke motz, like chaff, ke. So I came up with a simple acronym. By the way, grammarians like to call these prefixes. We'll just call them an aid to learning. So if you can remember the 2 names, Moshe, easy, the Chalev, or Caleb. So if you know someone named Caleb. So Caleb was the companion of Joshua, when the 12 spies went into the land, and 10 came back with a bad report, and 2 came back with a good report. Who were the 2 that had the good report? There was Joshua, and Caleb. And you say, well, why here it says this is Caleb? It has to do with the Vav here. And it has to do with this being a particular kind of letter that normally takes a dot. But anyway, I don't want to, it's too much of a rabbit trail. We'll come to this eventually. But right now, just a Moshe v'Chalev. Now, if we vertically orient these letters, like I'm going to do right now, then we can see that the mem stands for from. The shin stands for that. The hey generally stands for the. Sometimes it's a question marker. Hayodea, Hayodeata, it's a bit formal, a little bit literary. Sometimes you find it in biblical texts and rabbinic texts, but just so you know it's there, but most of the time it means ha. So we move on. The means and. Now, sometimes it's pronounced oo, and there are specific rules for that, 2 different categories. We'll bump into that, and the word bump is going to be important, by the way. I used it deliberately. Ka, we've already mentioned, as or like. Lamed stands for or 2. And beit or veit, it can be several things, in, on, with, as. You have to know it from context, and you'll see that along the way. So have you ever seen anything, William, like this before? Has this ever come across your radar?
On what part of it again? Sorry.
Oh, I'm just checking to see if you paid attention.
Yeah. It's funny. You caught me the moment I didn't. I actually got a message I had to respond to on Facebook. Sorry.
Okay, well, we'll forgive it this time, but I want you to write 500 times. I am cognizant of my transgression.
So what was your question, by the way?
No, I said, have you ever had this kind of pointed out to you that the letters which tend to appear on the front of words
Prefixes.
that are these little words, some of them are prepositions.
Okay.
One of them is a definite article here. This
Right.
is a connector, a conjunctive. But I took the name Moshe and Kalev or Bechalev and vertically oriented them so people could see what these stand for. Okay.
Oh, I like that.
Now, it helps, but
Yeah.
you also have to know like the word that you're attaching it to, because it could be a little confusing. But this is one simple way to do that. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, because it showed up in today's text, is something called smichut. Smichut basically means adjacency or one thing being close to another. So here we have these two words, shem etzem, shem etzem. Shem etzem, this is a grammatical term. It just means a noun. So it means the essential name in this case. Shem etzem. So we all know that nouns we all in school, we learn person, place, or thing. Some of us later on in school learn person, place, thing, and quality, like beauty, happiness, words like that. So I just want to run through this comparison. We have words in Hebrew that describe nouns, that describe things with qualities like big, small, etc. And then we have certain terms that are put together with one noun plus another noun. So military intelligence would be a case. What we call in English a compound noun. There are different ways of creating compound nouns in English. In Hebrew, we're just talking about one noun plus another noun. That's the formula here. So let's take here, for example, Dani Yeled Gadol. Dani is a big boy. Avi Yeled Katan. Avi is a small boy. Okay. Dani Hayeled Hagadol. Dani is the big boy. Avi Hayeled Hakatan. Avi is the small boy. Okay, so this is an example of adjectives. Gadol, Katan. Adjectives without a definite article, without the, and examples with. And notice, by the way, that in Hebrew, for example, in English, if I say Dani is the big boy, or the big boy is Dani, how many times am I using the? Once.
Right.
In Hebrew, how many times am I using the?
3.
Twice.
4. Oh, yeah.
Dani, right? Hayeled Hagadol. Or I can flip it around and say Hayeled Hagadol, Dani. But in either way, with an adjective, I'm going to, if I'm using the, I got to do it twice. Okay. Hachag Hatov, the good holiday, Ha'ish Hasameach, the happy man. So I don't say Ha'ish Sameach because that would mean the man is happy. So if I said here, Dani Hayeled Gadol, it would mean Dani, the boy, is big. By the way, let's throw another monkey wrench in here, shall we? For those who may not know, there is no am, are, or is in Hebrew. So I'm really saying Dani, the boy, the big.
Right.
That's what it sounds like.
Right.
So the syntax in your head, which is not a tax you pay for sinning, by the way, as in Hebrew we call it tahbir, syntax. The word order is a little bit different in your head, and you have to kind of that's why it works both ways. When you hear Israelis say things like, "But I must to tell you," ain't because I must to tell you. So same thing with Avi. Now, here's an example. I'm going to build a little example toward smichut. So Dani Yeled Kibbutz. Now, is there an adjective here? No. Kibbutz is a noun. Yeled is a noun. Boy is a noun. This is an example of smichut, and it's just very normal looking. It's just and there's actually 4 different forms to this concept of smichut. Again, don't try to learn all this today. Just observe, okay? Because it's going to come up again. And just like Rabbi Akiva, who at 40 observed the influence of water on the rock and said, water is very soft, rock is very hard, but over time it makes an impression on the rock from the repetition. Then he went off and he began learning Torah, because we say, Ein Torah, Ein Maim Ila Torah, that Torah is like water and has this effect. So we want the steady drip, drip, drip of the information coming to us. And that's what we're doing here. So just relax, watch, enjoy, review if you want to. But all these things we're talking about are going to come up in other contexts. I can't stress that enough. So just take it easy. Enjoy the ride. So Dani Yeled Kibbutz. Dani is basically a kibbutz boy. He's from a kibbutz. Gam Avi Yeled Kibbutz. So Avi is also Avi is a Yeled from a kibbutz. Okay. So I could say about both of them, Dani Va'avi. Oh, I did a wrong thing here. I just made a big mess here. Okay. I was cutting and pasting earlier, and I cut out what I wanted to put here. Oh, that's not going to work. All right. So let me look at this. All right, let's drop down here to the girls. All right. So we'll come back to this in the next edition. I'll fix this. Al chet shechatati, as we say, about the sin that I sinned, but it was b'shogeg and not deliberately. It was an error. Rina yalda gdola. Rina is a big girl. Dina yalda ktana. Dina is a small girl. Rina hayalda hagdola. Rina is the big girl. Dina hayalda haktana. Dina yaldat kibbutz. Now notice here, you see this yalda, yalda. Where did this come from? Because this is noun plus noun. This should have been up here that Dani and Avi are yaldei instead of yaladim, yaldei kibbutz. Gam Dina yaldat kibbutz. So what happens is, in this case, if the first one's feminine, the hay goes out to lunch, a taf comes and takes its place. We're going to see this in several places, so don't worry about it. So Dina Verina Yeladot Kibbutz. This is plural, the normal way that you would make a plural on something that's feminine with the vav and the taf. Okay, but I'm just going to run way back up here real quick. Let me see if I can get to it real quick in the text. I'll show you what I was talking about. Excuse me for the detour. I can't walk very fast. I'm just skimming up really quickly. I want to get back to the text itself, and I'll show you what I was talking about. All right. Right here. If this word were standing by itself, singular, it would be peleg, a split or a division of waters here. If it were by itself, plural, it would be plagim. But because this is a noun and this is a noun, and it's masculine, instead of being plagim mayim, it's going to be palgei mayim. And that appears over and over and over in Hebrew texts. Modern, rabbinic, biblical, it's all over the place. You'll see it. So that's what it is. A lot of people don't understand why it does that, but now you have a bit of an idea of why. Okay, so let's head back here because I want to get to the end here today. Thank you for your patience, and I'm sorry for the error. Okay, this is what I want to talk about. Okay, the very last verse 6 of our text today in Psalm 1, says, Ki Yodea Hashem, oops, I'm going to take that out of there and put the hay in there. Ki Yodea Hashem derech tzadikim, Hashem knows the ways of the righteous ones. V'derech hashaim toved. Now, William, a really interesting question popped into my head when I looked at this psalm.
Right.
The term tzaddik appears some 50 times in the book of Psalms, 66 times in the book of Proverbs. While some of those are attributed to Hashem, the majority are attributed to persons that are designated as righteous. Well, anybody who comes from a Christian background or who is presently, within the context of let's say, the evangelical church world, is going to have a conundrum with this text. Why? If there are none righteous, according to Paul, then who are these?
That's funny.
All right, it just sort of jumps out at you.
Yeah, that's nice.
I spent 20 years, as a born again, spirit filled, tongue speaking Christian. Several of those, trying to remember exactly how long I was, licensed or ordained, but I knew this stuff, so I never paid attention when I read any of these things in the Psalms or the Proverbs. Never asked this question. So what is the biblical definition of righteous? For that, we need to go to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 20, which says, Ki Adam ein tzadik ba'aretz, asher ya'aseh tov v'lo yachteh. Basically says there is no person righteous in the land, in the world, basically, which, there's the word asher again, which does good, ya'aseh tov v'lo yachteh. There's no person that does good and that does good and doesn't sin. In other words, there's the translation. That's kind of my translation. Here's the conclusion. Righteous doesn't mean sinless.
Right.
And I think that for the longest time, I thought it did, because man is fallen, man is sinful, so we have to have the righteousness of God. We used to use the concept of a prism that, if you look through this prism, the red turns to white, and with all kinds of different analogies to explain how God is going to look at sinful man through the prism of the blood of JC, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And that's the biblical text doesn't bear that out. The biblical text gives us a definition here that righteous people have a capacity to err. In fact, it's mentioned in the book of Proverbs. Sheva tzadik yipol v'kam. 7 times a righteous person will fall and rise up. He uses the word tzaddik.
Yep.
It's not talking about Hashem.
Right.
Sheva tzadik yipol v'kam. 7 times a righteous person will fall. And so it doesn't mean he only has 7 times in his life. That'd be a little bit literal.
Right.
But it means that we struggle with things. In fact, this world is all about struggling. That's a whole other discussion that we could talk long and deep about, from what's called the concept of musar, or musar, of the technology of character development, which is contained in many classic sfarim, classic texts. So this is what we're extracting then today from Psalm chapter 1, is that there are righteous people in the world and there are wicked people in the world. There are people who kind of blow it, and there are people that, for whatever reason, the time wasters, or the people that depreciate or don't appreciate what Hashem has given us in terms of our resources and how to use those to better ourselves. In fact, my favorite text, I think, from the Siddur is at the very, very at the end of the davening, what we call davening, the praying each day. The text called the Aleinu talks about our incumbency, our duty. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol. It's incumbent upon us to give praise to the one who is the ruler of all. In the second paragraph of that, there's 4 words in it. It says, Letaken olam b'malchut shakai, to repair the world under the sovereignty of the all-sufficient one. Okay, and that world repairing has to be inextricably tied up with being to connect to Hashem's kingdom, malchut shakai, and that comes from understanding His purpose for you. Whether you're a Noachide, whether you're a Jew, whether you're what's called a Baal Tshuva, you're finding your way back, whether you're someone who's always grown up in what we call a frum home, somebody who's always been Torah observant, but it may be observance that's more from the head, or from the hands, not necessarily from the heart. Hashem wants our hearts. That's made very clear. The book of Isaiah opening up, made very clear in Psalm 51, which was one of the ones that we're going to study along the way. We can't do all 150 of them, but we're going to do certain key ones that will impart to us not only some beneficial understanding of Hebrew, but also some beneficial understanding of how do I live in this world with the tools that are made available to me. Mm-hmm. Do you have any comment or question to conclude with?
No, that was actually quite interesting. You had my attention the whole time, except for that one message.
Except for the one message.
Hey, can you switch your camera back?
Yes, I will. I just want to make one last thing here. Sure. One last slide here.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So, if you're watching, of course you're watching. If you like a PDF copy of the notes for today's shir, then you can email me at gshebrew@gmail.com. Just put notes in the subject line. If you want to mention something comment-wise, you're welcome to, but you don't have to. And if you'd like information on a newly forming conversational Hebrew class, or you want to discuss any one-on-one Hebrew coaching, then same thing, but just put Learn Hebrew in the subject line. So I'm here to help if I can. And let's drop back down from stop share, and we're back. There we are.
Excellent. Very good. All right. Yeah, no, it was great. I really enjoyed it this time. So, of course, I always enjoy your teaching.
Oh, boy,
this time.
Oh, boy, you recovered that. I really enjoyed it this time. Uh-huh.
That's fun. Oh man, that's funny. I had something happen yesterday. I was at a birthday party yesterday, and this kid was talking about his grandmother, and he was nervous as could be, and he got up and he goes, his grandmother was 81 years old, and he said, "Grandma," he said, "I've really have enjoyed you, in your 81st year." And I was like, so it took 80 years to get past all the bad stuff. I don't know. That sounded kind of weird. Anyhow. Okay, my dear brother. Well, I certainly appreciate your time, and thank you all for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you on episode 3, coming to a theater near you real soon. Take care, everybody. Shalom, shalom. Bye.
Shalom,
My dear
everyone.
friends, hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNaChTalk.com, TaNachTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.
אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד איפוק זו העוצמה ויתור זו הגדולה השאיפה